Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest Lilja and Lou podcast. This is episode 42, I believe. Is that correct? It's really hard to keep. Really hard to keep track of the numbers now. Yes, 42. And our last podcast we talked about Maximum Overdrive, and this one we're going to talk about Mercy. But before we do that, Hans wants to give a shout out to a country called Azerbaijan.
Exactly. As those of you who follow my site probably knows by now, I try to collect a king book in every language that he has been published in. And so far, I have books in 54 different languages, counting Brill, I think it's
Braille.
You can debate if that is a language, because it's for those who don't know, it's the language that the blind use.
Mm-hmm.
In Sweden, it's called, if you translate it, like dot writing.
Oh, okay.
It consists of dots that they read with fingers. So
right.
It's impressive. I've tried, but I couldn't read the book. So a couple of weeks ago, I found out that Stephen King is actually published in a country called Azerbaijan, the country is located around Turkey and below Russia. Mm-hmm. And the publisher, who is called, if I'm pronouncing it right, Quanun, actually sent me a copy of 11/22/63.
Wow.
For my collection. So that's a really cool book.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually got another book as well in Azerbaijan when I was at it. And I think this is an older book. And in it they have The Dead Zone and a couple of shorter stories mixed in from his collection. And the funny thing with this book is that the author, who is Stephen King, but they spell his name quite different. They spell it Stiven, Stephen, and a lot of different countries actually spell his first name like that.
Okay.
So that isn't that strange.
Mm-hmm.
But in his last name, they have a K, I, N, and a Q.
Yeah.
So they have changed the G to a Q.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't really understand that. Some countries spell their name as they sound when they speak them.
Right.
But I don't know exactly how you would pronounce this to get it to King. But it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see pictures of these books on my site.
Okay, cool.
So, yeah. So, and if you don't know it, 54 languages, probably about 7 of those are unofficial countries that have just taken his book and translated and released them without permission. But others are official editions. So
cool.
It's an interesting collection.
Okay. And
yeah.
Thanks to, was it a book publisher that sent it to you, or is it a person, or?
No, a book publisher.
A publisher. Oh, okay. Well, that's very kind of them. Thank you very much for doing that. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so with that, let's wander over into the death room and see what is in the news. Welcome, welcome. Do not fear the door that lies before you. We will protect you. We are your guides, Hans and Lou, and we will give you the latest in Stephen King news. But before we do so, you must prove yourself worthy. You must open the door and join us in the death room. And surprisingly enough, or not so surprising, depending on how you look at it, our first news story is about a story called A Death. And this is a news story that you can find a link to on Hans' website. It's published by New Yorker. Sorry.
Yep.
Drawing a blank there. And it's up online. Hans has a link at a site where you can read the story. It's a short story. Takes maybe 10, 15 minutes to read. And this will be part of the Bazaar of Bad Dreams collections that's coming out later this year. And we'll talk about it more next podcast. I haven't read it yet, but Hans has, and he said he liked it quite a bit, didn't you?
Yeah, it's a very interesting ending to it that I personally liked, and we'll see what the rest of you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And something else that's interesting with this story is, as you mentioned, it will be published in Bizarre Bad Dreams later this year. So now we know 4 stories that will be in that book. This one, Drunken Fireworks, that will be released on audio in June. Bad Little Kid, that was released in French and German only.
Mm-hmm.
And in a revised edition. So far we have 4 stories, and I think King has mentioned that it should be around 20 stories in the book.
That sounds familiar, yeah.
Yeah, so we still have a lot of other stories to look forward to.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff.
Yes. Okay, moving on. As some of you probably know, Misery has been done as a stage play several times. Actually, just here in Sweden, it's been performed 3 times with different actors. Now it's time again, and this time it will head for Broadway, and none other than Bruce Willis will play the lead.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that he wanted to do theater actually, but I don't know. What do you think? Will it work?
Yeah, I think Willis is a very interesting choice for this role. He's the James Caan of this generation, you know, because James Caan was a very physical actor in his heyday, and Bruce Willis is in that same mold. He's a bit older now than I think when Caan's played the role in the movie version, but the play was written by Academy Award winner William Goldman, who did The Princess Bride, Butch Cassidy, and The Sundance Kid, amongst others. And the actress who's playing Annie Wilkes, her name is Elizabeth Marvel. Apparently she's quite a well-known stage actor. I don't really know anything about her, to be honest, but I have to say, looking at her picture, she sure doesn't look like Annie Wilkes to me, but
No.
So that will be interesting, but I'm sure she'll play the role. But I would love to see this. I think it would be a fantastic experience to see Misery done as a play, because it is really a one-room story for the most part. So I think it would be awesome to see. So if anybody out in our listening audience is planning to go see, please let us know, and we'd love to hear your thoughts and maybe get some pictures and whatnot, if possible, of the performance when you're attending.
Yeah, the plan is that it will premiere this fall. So it's pretty soon. You mentioned that she doesn't look like Annie Wilkes. In one of the productions here in Sweden, Annie Wilkes was played by the same woman who in the early 70s played Pippi Longstocking. You know that character?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. As a kid. So that was a really bizarre experience, going from Pippi Longstocking to Annie Wilkes.
What was the reception to that version?
Yeah, she got good receptions. She did a good job with it,
cool.
And it worked. And she's a lot older now, but she's still Sweden's Pippi Longstocking. So,
right.
But she did a good job, so it worked.
Yeah. All right. Up next, turn into book news. The paperback version of Revival is up on the Hans site. You can see the cover, and it's a much nicer cover than the hardcover. Yeah. Again,
I agree.
Anything but that lightning bolt, that just drives me crazy. I know I've harped on that so many times now, but this one's got a picture of the church with one window lit and everything else dark, which I like. I like the atmosphere of it.
Yeah.
And it will be released on May 1st, so pre-orders are up if you need to do it that way. And I like the back cover too, with Steve's got the guitar over his shoulder, but that mustache, I don't know, it kind of looks like a porn stash to me.
Yeah, I read it was gone by now, so
yeah, I'm sure it is.
He shaved it off.
Yeah. So
and
nice cover.
And hopefully in this paperback we will get teaser chapter from Finders Keepers. It's happened
probably.
Before.
Yep.
Yeah.
Probably.
So by May 1st.
Yeah, maybe a new introduction too. But I don't think he usually does a new one just for paperbacks, unless it's a re-release or something. But...
Oh, yeah. So I think if we get the teaser chapter, I think we should be happy with that.
Yeah.
Next up, and I know this will make you very happy, season 3 of Under the Dome has started filming. Yay!
And there was much joy.
Yeah.
But Hans, you might get your hopes up, because there's a character missing from that picture.
Yep. You can always hope. I'll leave it to our listeners to find out who.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually, because when I posted this on my site and it went out on the Facebook page, most of the comments there were very negative. So it seems like most King fans agree with us, at least those who make their voice heard, that the first season wasn't that good.
Mm-hmm.
And but no word yet if this will be the last one and if we will get the conclusion or if they plan on keeping it going. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to see where everybody goes after they go through that portal at the end of the second season. Yep. All right, so book, TV, and now movie. More potential movie news. The Jaunt is potentially going to be adapted as a movie. And again, knowing the story, it's a very short story. So
yeah.
And the premise is that it's a take on the transporter from Star Trek, but people are teleporting from Earth to Mars, but they have to do it while under anesthesia. Otherwise, there could be potential problems. And of course, in this story, one of those problems occurs. So it's a stinger type of story. So I don't know. And maybe this will be an interesting to look back upon as we later, if this does come to fruition, we get to see this as a movie, because we're going to be talking about another story that was adapted into movie in this podcast. And I think the same challenges exist for The Jaunt as it did for Gramma. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I think the story is a very good one. I remember liking it when I read it, but as you say, I think they would have to expand it so very much to fill up a whole movie, and I think they should do it like a Twilight Zone episode or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't think you can expand it into a feature film.
No, not unless you got a whole bunch of stuff that's going on while they're in transit, I guess. But yeah. But it's interesting. Brad Pitt is one of the people that's interested in this, so we'll have to see how it goes. But yeah, I'm a little leery again. To put it into a movie, you're going to have to take a lot of liberty with it, and you'll lose probably the core shock value of that story if you do that.
Yeah. Okay, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing for this news is King posted on Twitter, looks like Finders Keepers, the new Hodges book, is almost ready, out in June. Better than the first one, I think.
That's a good way to sell your book, eh?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm actually listening to the audio version now.
Already? Wow.
I'm gearing up for the release of the Finders Keepers. And I must say that I like it even more now than I did the first time. So it's a good book, really good book. And I hope Finders Keepers...
Oh, okay. You're listening to the audio of Mr. Mercedes.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry.
Okay, I took it that you're listening to the autos for Finders Keepers. I was going, wow, that's early.
Yeah, no, that's my bug in Steven's office that I'm listening to when he reads.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Sorry. No, I'm listening to Mr. Mercedes.
Oh, okay. My bad.
I wish it was Finders Keepers, but no luck yet.
Oh, I think a lot of people really like that book, and I have to admit that I liked it more than I thought I was going to. And I really think that the synopsis for Finders Keepers, to me, this is like the bookend to Misery.
Yeah.
It's like how Lisey's story and Bag of Bones are like bookend stories. I think this is going to be the same vibe. At least this is the vibe I'm getting from what's I've been heard about it so far. So I'm very excited to see how this turns out.
Yeah. And it will be very interesting to see how he connects the three characters that's supposed to go through all three books.
Yeah.
And see how they continue to interact.
Yeah, especially because when you read the synopsis, it doesn't really seem like the other two characters tie into the story in any way, unless they're just becoming like a team to help Hodges out with these. Like, I know they have their skill sets, but you would also think that they would get on with their own lives too, right? So yeah. So it's going to be interesting, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Which is, I mean, I always look forward to King books, but to look forward to a mystery story with no supernatural elements is an unusual thing for me. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
And that is the news.
Yes.
This is great. What's our job? We'd like drive around, pick up stiffs or what?
It's time for reviews from the Night Shift.
Now we're going to turn ourselves to reviewing a movie. And Hans, why don't you set up what Mercy is all about?
Yes, this is a movie based on a short story called Gramma. And Mercy is the name of the Gramma, which to me is a very strange name. But maybe it's because I'm not English.
It's a strange name.
Yeah.
It's an unusual name.
The story is, in the written story, it's about a kid who is left home to guard his old and sick grandma while his mother is visiting his brother on the hospital in the hospital after he's broken his leg. And the kid is a bit scared of the grandma because he gets a strange vibe from her. And it turns out she is, and we are going to spoil this just so you know that.
As always, yeah.
Yeah, as always. She's a witch, and during the time that the mother is in the hospital, dies and has to check to see if she's dead and what is it going to do if she is, and stuff like that. And this has been expanded to a movie that is about an hour and a half, I think, maybe a bit shorter. And they have added a lot of stuff to this movie. A lot of it is told in the story, written story, and we now see it here. But I didn't like it at all. I think it was they went all wrong about it, I think, and a lot about the acting as well. The kid is played by Chandler Rigg from Walking Dead, and I think he's not as good as he can be. The grandmother is played by Shirley Knight, and I think she's a lot worse than she could be. I think she's supposed to be an old lady who's a bit
senile.
What do you call it when you're? Yeah, thank you, senile. But to me, she sounds more like a spoiled brat that doesn't want to eat her lunch. So I don't think it works. Like when they are feeding her with a spoon and she refuses to let go of the spoon and she sits with it in her mouth like a day or something. And I don't know. It just didn't work for me. I didn't buy it. So the ending was more spectacular than in the story. So no, I didn't like it. I think it was a crappy adaptation.
This is a real head scratcher because if you go through the cast, like you said, Chandler Riggs, Frances O'Connor, Dylan McDermott, Amanda Walsh, Chris Browning, Jack Carter, there's a lot of good actors in this production, but they're all pretty well wasted, especially like Dylan McDermott, who's playing like sort of the high school sweetheart for the mother in this story, the boy's mother.
Yeah.
And Chandler Rigg is playing George, and his mother's name is Rebecca. And him and Dylan McDermott's character, Jim Swan, this old unrequited love thing going on, even though he's married to somebody else, but there's always this tension between the two. And you can see that they still have a shine for each other. So that's a weird vibe going on there too. So, but I think the biggest problem I have with this adaptation is they did what Cujo did with the book ending. They Cujo'd the ending of the story, because if you remember the grandma story, the boy doesn't come to a very good end in the story.
Yeah.
But in this one, he of course triumphs. So that right there, that undermines the story. And for me, it bothers me more with this story than it does with Cujo, because in that one, you can sort of see why they want the boy to live, because, the mother goes through this big battle.
Yeah.
I know Hans likes the darker ending, but I can understand from an audience perspective when a mother's fighting for a child. But in this one, the child's pretty well on his own, and you don't really like the character either. So
no.
You'd rather see it play out true to the book. And I don't blame the actor in this case, because he's basically playing a zombie. Like he has no arc. He has no direction. He has no driving force except just trying to survive, I guess, really. And the relationship with his brother is interesting too. Like I actually thought that was the best part of the movie, even though it was nothing fantastic. But yeah, there's not a lot of good things to say about this. It's just a real head scratcher when I go through this cast.
Yeah.
It just really stuns me how flat. It really felt like in the last 15 minutes they ran out of money and just had to wrap up the whole movie so quickly. It just really didn't work at all.
And there's other things that, at least to me, indicates that those who did the movie isn't very happy with it, because the first thing is that they didn't get it released when it done. It sat on the shelf for very long, and when it finally was released, it was released for I think it was on iTunes first, and then later it came on DVD. So it didn't come with a big bang either, and they didn't call it Stephen King's Mercy. And I mean, everybody who does a movie that is somewhat based on Stephen King uses his name to get it out, but they didn't. Yeah. So I don't know. I got the feeling that they had big plans for this movie. They did it. When it was done, they thought that shit, this didn't work out very well. Let's just get it out there and be done with it and
Yeah.
hope that it brings in some money. I don't know, maybe it's me, but I got that feeling that they didn't promote it and they didn't sound like it was something they were proud of having done. So I don't know. It felt like they just wanted to get rid of it.
Yeah, I have the same feeling too, and like the delay, it almost, we're just projecting here, but it's almost like they were waiting or hoping to hear back from King whether or not they could put his name on the cover.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I guess I don't even know if he's saw this or is really aware of it, but that's kind of the feeling you get, that they were looking for something to promote it or make it more visible to the fandom, but it just really looks like it just somebody either at the studio or something just basically said, nope, not spending any more money on this, wrap it up and let's move on. And because the last 10 minutes just really, the movie just really falls apart in the last 10 minutes.
Yeah.
There's no real tension, and the relationship between the boy and the grandmother is not really explored properly. Like you said, they make her seem more like a spoiled kid than a menacing, senile mix of menacing and senile person, right?
Yeah, and most scenes felt very, very played. They didn't feel real. It felt like they were just playing theater for each other. Mm-hmm. You didn't believe the scenes. So no, I think this is up around the Children of the Corn movies in the same quality.
Yeah, I'm looking at its rating on IMDb and it's at 5.1. So.
Oh, that's very high, I think.
Yeah. I would put it around that. I don't think it's as bad as some of the Children of the Corn movies, but it's just really flat, and it's just, you're going, why are these actors not being used properly?
Yeah.
Like this is not a bad cast. It's a head scratcher, and we've seen this a couple of times. But the people that are making the movie they seem to be making it based solely on the fact that it's a Stephen King property, but they don't really get the story.
No.
It's a real head scratcher because this is not a complicated story.
No.
And as we mentioned off the top in the news, this is the problem that you can run into when you're trying to expand a short story into a movie. I mean, this is a short movie. It's only 80 minutes. Like most movies are an hour and a half. This is short. So again, that sends off signal bells to me that they ran out of money.
Yeah.
But to take a novel or a novella and condense it always seems to be better than to take a short story and try to expand it or flesh it out, unless you've got a really cool idea. And this just adds a lot of uninteresting stuff around what should really is the struggle between the boy and his grandmother, right? And that's what the story should have focused on, but there's all this extra stuff that doesn't go anywhere that they added.
Yeah, and I think a big problem today is also when, if you go like 10 or maybe 20 years back, you could buy a Stephen King story and make a really crappy movie, slap Stephen King's name on it, and it would sell anyway because people saw everything Stephen King had his name on.
Yeah.
But I think that has changed, and I think that maybe both unfortunately because there are so many bad movies, and also because people are more informed these days with internet, and you can read reviews very quickly and stuff. People don't I think there are fans like you and me who sees everything because Stephen King has done it still. But I think the fact that at least like in 10 or 20 years ago, a movie that had Stephen King's name on it drew an audience.
Yep.
Whether it was good or bad. But today I think people look more like to reviewers and stuff like that, and the word goes out, and if it isn't bad, they don't watch it, even if it's based on Stephen King. So I don't think you can make those easy bucks anymore.
No.
And that makes the bad movies not seen as much as before, because a bad movie could be a success just based on Stephen's name on it. I don't think they can do that in the same extent today.
No, I agree with you. There's a couple of factors play there. The first one, as you mentioned, was Stephen King's name on the title of a project. It's not a slam dunk anymore for a certain guaranteed amount of return on investment. And that's partially because King's been around for a while now, and he and his bulk of his audience is aging up. So, and these types of movies are targeted towards the younger crowds, and there's just so many of these really low budget horror movies that are much more in tune with the mindset of what attracts younger audiences, whereas the Stephen King stories tend to attract an older audience because they're more traditional type stories.
Yeah.
Even if they did this kind of story about a witch, they would position it quite a bit differently than the way this story was presented. The aging of King's audience and just the fact that there's so many horror movies being put out, because horror movies are cheap to make, and if they're halfway decent, the studios can make a pretty good profit off of them. And we've seen that with couple of the last couple of years. Some low budget horror movies have brought back some big money, like The Conjuring and things of that nature. So this kind of stuff really gets lost in the shuffle. And it's disappointing, but oh well.
It's interesting, and I have to bring this up now. It really doesn't have anything to do with Mercy, but since it's a crappy movie, I guess we could expand our talk a bit. When you mention old and new Stephen King fans, do you think that most of Stephen King's fans today are people who became fans like about 10 years ago or even further back that are still with him? Or do you think he gets a lot of new fans?
I'm just guessing. I have no data to back this up, but I think it's a mix, because I do see, like, if you go on the internet and you're seeing reviews of King books and that, or people talking about King, said, "Oh, I used to read him, but then I kind of lost interest as I got older."
But then I get that a lot here too.
Yeah, but then I see a lot of feedback or comments from younger readers that's saying, "Wow, I just started reading Stephen King, and these books are fantastic." And so I think it's a bit of a trade-off, but I still think the bulk of his audience is older than the general age of moviegoers. Even though this was never released theatrically, most horror movies tend to attract younger audiences. I think most older people would probably watch this kind of stuff when it came out on Netflix or something like that. But most people that go to the theater to see horror movies tend to be younger. But that's just my perspective on it. I have no facts or figures to back that up. But I've just seen a mix of comments, and it sounds like you've seen the same thing, where there's a lot of readers say they stopped reading him after a certain point, and other ones that say they just started reading him and think he's really good. So.
Yeah, but because that Stephen King has been getting a bit of bigger attention here in Sweden the last year, because his new publisher has been much more effective and actually publish books when they are released now than before. Right. So I've been talking about him on the radio like 2 times or something like that. And when around my friends and at my workplace, when Stephen King is mentioned, a lot of people say that, oh yeah, I read him like 10 years ago, but then I, as you say, lost interest.
Yeah.
Or maybe I read him 10 years ago and I'm going to start again and read again. But it's very seldom that you hear someone saying, oh, I've never heard of him, but I just found a book yesterday and started reading, and he's really great. Yeah. So I get the feeling that he isn't getting much new fans.
Probably not. I mean,
most are from before, and maybe if like your kids are growing up and you're showing them books in that way, but I still get the feeling that it's mostly older fans that are still with him.
Yeah, I mean, he's been around since the 70s, right? That's a long haul for a writer to be. I mean, his books still get at the top, selling 10 lists on the New York Times bestsellers list, but again, that's probably because a lot of his readers have stuck with him and are older readers. So the marketplace is changing. I still think the books that are generally regarded as his top books still attract readers across all ages, but I would guess that the bulk of his readers are the ones that were there, as he calls them, his faithful readers from pretty well day one. For sure.
Could you imagine that finding Stephen King today and having all these books unread ahead of you? Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah. If you would like all the books, I mean that's the other thing too. Yeah. Like, books that we like, some people come along and they pick up the one and they read it and they go, it was okay, because some of his books are so particular to a certain time and place. Like some of them are timeless, like Shawshank Redemption. That can work in any time period, but something like Misery or something like that, where with cell phones and the internet,
Yeah.
that's a lot harder to do. And I don't know, it'll, and things tend to go in cycles. Sherlock Holmes has been around for 100 years and he falls in and out of prominence, but he never really totally goes away. And I think King will be like that too, because there's something about horror stories set like in the pre-internet cell phone days they're much scarier because it's so much easier to cut people off from each other, which is so much harder to do today. But
now you have to have that no service.
Yeah, no service,
Every
or my
time
battery ran out, or
every time something horrible happened, you have no service.
so it's really hard to do that. Or the ghosts are smart enough to know how to manipulate your phone and stuff like that, right? So it's kind of so it's a lot harder to get away with that kind of stuff nowadays. And Gramma is one of those stories that I think works better like on a Twilight Zone type of format with an anthology series. Same with the Jaunt that we talked about in the news. Like, I'm pretty leery of that being turned into a movie. But there's a lot of factors against this ever really being a breakout movie. The director, however, would have to have a really great idea to expand the movie beyond what the short story is, and that definitely didn't happen here. You could feel just padding it out.
Yeah, and I feel also that even today, with today's technology and everything, there are still some stories that shouldn't be filmed because you can never do it as it's told and when you play it in your own mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that after Lord of the Rings and movies like that, a lot of people say that you can actually do films of every story because the technique is there. But I think some stories just won't work as a movie. And I don't think you have to make movies of every story. Some can just be stories.
Yeah, I mean, and in some stories, the time period is what influences the character to a large degree. And if you change the setting, then the character changes too, right? And then it's not the same story anymore either. So yeah, it's a tough juggling act, but you can get timeless kind of stories like I mentioned with the Green Mile and Shawshank. People will watch that because it's a fairy tale thing, sort of like Lord of the Rings, a fantasy thing. But if you try to move something like Misery to today, a writer getting cut off from the world because he had an accident, well, with a cell phone and the internet, that's just not that's just not easy to pull off. I mean, you can't carry that tension. She'd have to be overtly crazy right from the start and have him locked in the room and not pretend that she's his friend. And that's part of the charm of that story, because for the longest time you don't know, is she good or is she bad, until like you've got the feeling, and then all of a sudden at a certain point in the story when she starts to lose her temper, you're going, oh boy.
There is one way they could do it in a believable way, though. They could make her use the same internet provider that I do, because then it wouldn't be strange if we were without the internet like for 4 weeks. So that would be totally believable.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good one.
Yep.
That is not an endorsement for Tons's internet provider.
No.
Okay, well, I'm sorry we don't have a lot to say about the movie, obviously, but it's just not really good. It's a disappointment, especially with the talent involved, at least in front of the camera. Behind the camera, I'm not as familiar with the people.
No.
So Matt Greenberg, I think I've seen his name before.
This is a movie for those of us who just have to see everything based on Stephen King's stuff.
Yeah.
If you want to see a good movie, then you should definitely see something else.
Yeah, unless you're a big Walking Dead fan and you want to see Chandler Riggs and something else.
Well, not even then.
Oh, okay.
No. Not even then.
Alrighty, so that's our thoughts on Mercy. We have no mercy for Mercy. Sorry.
Nope.
And it doesn't seem like too many other people do either. But don't despair. We'll be back with another podcast soon. And thanks to the people from Scream Factory, we are going to be looking at the upcoming Blu-ray re-release of 2 of the Carrie movies that were made for TV. A remake from 2002 and another one, I don't know what year the Rage 2 was. The Rage for Carrie was released. But we'll be looking at that. There's a new double feature Blu-ray edition coming out. And I want to thank press person at Jout Factory, Shannon Meehan, for sending a review copy for us to look at. And so we'll be covering that next. Also, We have a little clip from Tyson Blue from our last week Maximum Overdrive overview. He realized he had thought of another tidbit, so we'll be playing that before we sign off, so that you can listen to that. It's something about one of the characters that you might not have known.
Hi, Hans. This is Tyson. I remembered what it was I forgot during recording session for the podcast last week. We were talking about a lot about the kid in the movie who was on his bike making his way. The kid was played by Holter Graham, who subsequently appeared with Anna Paquin in Fly Away Home. But he's also recorded a couple of King audiobooks. So he's continued his interactions in Kingdom. Talk to you later.
And got anything else, Hans, that we want to say before we sign off?
Yes, I just got an idea. I'm going to post a question on Facebook, asking all of you if you are new Stephen King fans or if you have been with him for a decade or two.
Right, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and then we can get an answer to our question earlier in this podcast.
Yeah.
And when this podcast is out, this question will have been out on Facebook a couple of days. So hopefully we'll have some answers to that, so you can just head over there and see for yourself.
Yep, and we'll talk about the results in our next podcast as well. So
yeah.
So now that all our internet problems are over with, hopefully we'll be hitting that 2-month of release target that we've set for the podcast, and we've got some big plans still for some other stuff coming up. Stephen King Revisited, something that Cemetery Dance is running, and we think we're going to tag along with them as well. So we'll be starting going through all the books that they're going through as well, and we'll start off with Carrie and give our thoughts on it. So that should be fun as well. So we'll cover off all the books that way as well, and talk about the posts that they get over there, which are pretty cool from guest authors and things like that. And in fact, Josh Boone is going to be doing a guest post. I believe it's going to be released Monday, March 14th, talking about The Stand, which the editor of Cemetery Dance, Richard Chismar, just finished reading and talking about.
Yeah.
So cool stuff.
Yeah, great. Okay, so that's it for this time.
That's right.
See you next time. And until then, stay safe.
But
stay scared.
Stay scared. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.